couple of weeks ago, I was at a ceremony for the spring equinox here in 2023 in the Southern Hemisphere, which was September the 23rd. And at that ceremony, which was a beautiful experience, I saw an old friend of mine there who I haven't seen for a while. And we were talking about the nature of information that's presenting itself out in the public and in our reality in this world we are living in now, and the amount of information that's coming into our sphere of influence. And I had this discussion with my friend about how in the past, in the ancient past and antiquity, that knowledge was probably, due to the mystery schools have shown us, was widespread throughout the society and civilizations that existed throughout in the darkest recesses of the before the antediluvian, the pre-antediluvian world. And maybe after the antediluvian world, there was a creation of a vacuum of that knowledge, and it was taken out of the public, so to speak, in the civilization, and only a small few group of people, a small collective of people, managed to hoard that information in regards to the nature of reality, the nature of the cosmos, the nature of the solar cycle, and of course the nature of what we consider to be reality in the cosmological conscious sense, and the science of life, existence, creation. And everything was, but in that time in prehistory, the information was taken by this collective and hoarded away, and that was kept to keep the majority of people in the civilizations that existed after the antediluvian worlds, after the antediluvian flood experience, to keep the masses dumbed down and easier to control. And that kind of was the way it was for a long time, for thousands of years, until the Renaissance. And in the Renaissance, we had a situation where art and culture blossomed and bloomed. But always in the real deep sense of the knowledge and the gnosis of how reality is, how the cosmological experience and creation of our solar system and where we are and who we really are was still kept amongst a few. It was still kept amongst a few. And even though artists and musicians put into expression levels of information that were for the initiates, could be understood and also could be seen, heard, and appreciated through art, through sculpture, through painting, through music, there was still en masse, there was still the lack of information available to people to truly understand and comprehend who they were, where they came from, and how reality was created in the first place, right? And what their experience was of reality, right? And this kind of was the way until maybe the 20th century, when we had a lot of publications and people who brought the mystery school knowledge, the late 19th century, early 20th century. People like Madame Blavatsky, Colonel Olcott, Edgar Cayce, Gurdjieff, Ouspensky, Rudolf Steiner, who brought this information into the public through mystery schools, public mystery schools, and then wrote about it and gave lectures and talks and shared this information with people who are wanting to come forward and be able to appreciate it, learn about it, study it, and understand it, embody it, integrate it, and assimilate it into their lives, right? And it wasn't really until the internet came along, which apparently was created at the CERN facility. And the CERN facility is the biggest user of the internet. It wasn't probably until the early 90s to the mid 90s that there was a huge flood of information that came through and people had access to, that began to give us deeper connection to the mystery school knowledge brought into a massive sphere, and was able to really get into the lives of anyone who wanted to find it. It was there at our fingertips, literally, right? And as we came through into the 21st century, that took off even further. And of course, in that ability for us to share information on the internet, there has been so many people that have brought forth information that's misdirecting, that is misdirection, mass misdirection, but also it needs to have a degree of discernment around the information portrayed, because a lot of it's absolute mumbo jumbo and woo woo and just ridiculous, stupid, and often misleading consciousness in avatars down a dead end cul-de-sacs to a place where you don't really want to go, but that information will lead you down that path to a place where you discover for yourself eventually you've been led down the garden path to nowhere. But there has been this enormous ability, or this ability to project and to also enable people to gather information over the last really 30 years via the internet to discover the nature of reality, who they are, where they come from, to understand ancient traditions and cultures, Vedic sciences from the Hebrew ancient Old Testament, and to have the deciphering, to have the ability to look at native traditions, the ability to look at information in a broadest brushstroke sense you could ever imagine from across the entire planet, the galaxy and beyond, and also understand the nature of reality in a way like we'd never had before. And my friend said to me at the ceremony, when I was explaining this whole concept to him, he said, but hey, hang on a minute. But in the last maybe few years, maybe 10 years, there's been a flood of misdirected energy and also misdirection, and the ability, because the system and the control system knows that all this information is there for people to discern for themselves and discover for themselves, and to get a greater understanding of how to take personal responsibility for their creations, how to create their reality, to know who they are, where they come from, and what they can actually do as creators through this plethora of information that's available to us. But he said, but they've also taken it to a whole new level now, when this information that was once upon a time kept by a small group of people throughout our history, throughout ancient antiquity up until our present day, maybe a couple of hundred years ago, that small collective had that knowledge for themselves and kept it for themselves so that they could remain in control over the simulation and the reality that we experience. He said what they've done is not the inversion, but what they've done is the other side of that. Rather than keeping that information for themselves, they've flooded the internet with absolute garbage and misdirection and mass distraction. So people will look at information that's presented to them from various talking heads, influencers, people that channel information, people that purport information. There's so many people on the internet now that share information that has no background, no historical precedent, has no real basis for even looking at it, but people cling to it because it gives them a sense of hope, a sense of connection, a sense of enlightenment, and in the sense that it gives them a chance to see their reality in a very different way. But a lot of that information could be controlled opposition by the control system in order to keep the knowledge that is now out into the public sphere for us to discern and discover for ourselves, still to themselves, the real essence of the knowledge that they've kept for themselves for thousands and thousands of years, even though it's in the public sphere, even though you can find it on the internet to some extent now, before this new censorship law comes in and potentially it's taken away from us once again within the confines of the censorship legislation that's going to be going internationally through the UN. If at some point they choose to begin to consider some information to be hate speech, or call it whatever you want to, but begin to censor the real nexus of information that can set people free to know who they truly are. If people who are sharing that information, the David Ickes of the world, are censored to a point where they can no longer have any influence to share the truth of what they've discovered through their research with the rest of the world because of the censorship laws, right? This is where we're going to. But in the meantime, before that happens, before we go down that, before that offer is accepted, because it's still an offer stage, before it's accepted, they've flooded the internet with so much information. A lot of it has no precedent for us to even look at it. But people will look at it and buy into it because it gives them a sense of connection, right? And he said they've gone the opposite, and he's so right. They've gone the other way. They've flooded the internet with all this information for us to look at. And the most important tool to move through this information, if we are researching, if we are looking at information, is to really come to a place of discernment. Discernment. And discern whether that information that we're looking at holds any water for us. And the place to discern that information from is our heart vortex. Our heart vortex is a place to utilize in regards to discerning whether the information that we are looking at has any merit for us to look at it, because the internet is truly, as my friend said, flooded with information for us to look at. And funnily enough, I saw a video yesterday on the Inspired channel with Gene Noland and Jacob Frank. No, Frank Jacob Frank. Not Jacob Frank. No. Not that guy. No. Not Sabatier Frankist. No. Frank Jacob. And Frank Jacob is a cat I came across a couple of years ago, and I've loved everything that comes out of this man's mouth. His call for discernment, his call for looking at information that's on the record and provable, his call for looking at the historical precedent and looking at the people that share information with him, and then going like, I'm going to have to use my discernment here to see whether this information holds any water for me. That man, for me, has taught me in the last interview I saw with him how important it is, once again, reaffirmed this for me in regards to also teaching me as well about the nature of looking at all this information. It was a reaffirmation of what my friend said to me in regards to the mass flooding of the internet of information. Frank Jacob said the same thing. We need this. The internet is now flooded with information. We need to discern, to come back to a place of discernment when we're looking at information and go like, right, okay, is this misdirection? Is this distraction? Where does this lie? Or is it my truth? Not a universal truth. Is it my truth? That's really important to look at that. And that was a really powerful maxim for me to hear. Is it true to me? Is it my truth? Is it my truth? In regards to information that's presented, and I look at that and I thought, man, this cat is super onto it in this way. And I recommend that video. It's on the Inspired channel, the Q&A between Gene Noland and Frank Jacob about transhumanism, AI, timelines, and the looking glass on YouTube. Really good video to watch. It was really awesome to see someone who coalesced and also collaborated with my friend's perception that the internet is being flooded with all this information, and we really need to understand that the powers that be, the control system, the cult, is flooding the internet with all this information, and we have the opportunity to look at it and then discern for ourselves what is truth to us. Thanks for watching. I truly appreciate it. Mā te wā. I'll see you again soon.